Hey guys, today we're going to take a look at our final exponent rules. So as you may know, we already took a look at 4 of them, and so we have 3 left to look at. So these 3 are a little bit different and sometimes a little bit harder to use. So the first one is power of a quotient. So this refers to when we have a fraction, so a number or a variable, and it's divided by something else. If that whole thing is raised to something, this rule allows us to apply that exponent to the top and to the bottom. This can help us then distribute it or break it down into a simpler form. Next up, we have the negative exponent. So you may start to see exponents with a negative sign, and often these are difficult to work with as they give us really small numbers. So to turn that exponent positive, we can write it over 1. So 1 over that base, and now our exponent is positive. For example, if we have 2 to the negative 2, instead of writing 2 to the negative 2, I could write 2 over 2 to the 2, which is now positive. And finally, a last one is we have fractional exponent rule. So if we have some base and it's raised to a fraction, we can rewrite this as a square root. And that top number is going to be a power underneath the square root sign, and that bottom number is going to be in that little check mark. And what's kind of cool about this is if you remember that, we know the square root sign is actually just like this. It's the second root. And then we have, say we have a number like 8, that number is just raised to the 1, we just don't write it. So if you can remember that this is actually something to the power of a half, then you'll remember that the bottom goes in this little check mark here, and then the top is going to be underneath. So now we're going to take a look at some examples for these. So to start off, we have the power of a quotient rule. So in this case, we have an exponent but it's to the power of that entire fraction. So according to this rule, what we can do is we can apply it to the top, which would give us 4x cubed, and we can apply it to the bottom, which would give us 3y cubed. So what's really important is we put it outside of those brackets because technically we still have to apply that 3 to the 4 and that 3 to the x. So if we wanted to keep solving it, you would have to do 4 cubed x cubed over 3 cubed y cubed. And then those 4 cubed and 3 cubed would just be numbers, and you'd leave the x and the y to the cubed. So same idea here. So if we take a look at this, we can apply this 2 to the top and then to the bottom. So if we write that differently, we would have 5 n to the 4 z to the 6 squared over 2x to the 8 z to the 3 squared. So now what we're going to do is, if we remember that when something is exponent is raised to an exponent, they get multiplied. So we have 5 squared on top, and 5 squared is 25. We then have n to the 4 to the 2, which gives us n to the 8. Then we have z to the 6 to the 2, which gives us z to the 12. And then on the bottom, we have 2 squared, which is going to give us 4. And then we have x to the 8 squared, which gives us x to the 16. And finally, z to the 3 squared, which gives us z to the 6. We can also reduce this one, so if there's any common differences between these two numbers, can we reduce those in any way? And then if you have variables that can subtract, like z, you could do that as well. But we're just going to focus on this one rule. So now if we take a look at 3, this is the negative exponent. So let's put this into action. So right now we have 3 to the power of negative 4. This isn't super helpful. It's a really small number. But we can rewrite this as 1 over 3 to the 4. So this is just another way to simplify it and just write it so that we do not have negative exponents. Same idea over here. However, sometimes it gets confusing if there's a negative sign in front of a number. We do not do the same thing with that, because that's just a negative number that we usually have. What in this case we need to focus on is right now we have a y to the negative 2. And what we do is we do the same thing. We're going to put that y underneath of 1. But technically on top, we still have negative 5z. So we can multiply that through. We'll have negative 5z all over y squared. And now all of our exponents are positive. Alright, finally we're going to take a look at our fractional exponent rule. So right now I've written 49 to the power of a half. And what we remember is I take the number and I'm going to put a square root sign. However, I need to know what number is going here and what number is going here. So if you remember, the bottom number goes into this check mark. So I have a 2 there, and the top number goes right here, but it's a 1, so we don't have to write it. So we actually have the square root of 49, which we know is 7. However, sometimes you might have to do the opposite direction, where you take a square root and you turn it into a fraction. So in this case, I have 64, and I need to figure out what's going to go on the top of the fraction and what's going to go on the bottom. Well, if you remember, what's in the check mark goes on the bottom, so the 3, and the other number is going to go on the top, so 2. So right now, we have 64 to the power of 2/3. So that's a look at our final different exponent rules, and feel free to subscribe along, follow along for some more simple math videos.